Hey everybody, how's it going? Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com to give you my thoughts on the WWE B-PPV events from Bad Blood 2004 through No Way Out 2005. There were a lot of WWE pay-per-views around this period. There were some times where you would have 2 pay-per-views in a 1-month period. It was getting ridiculous. But anyways, let's get down to the pay-per-views here. Bad Blood 2004, to me a very average show. You had a few quality matches. You had Randy Orton versus Shelton Benjamin for the IC title. That was good. You had Chris Benoit pulling double duty on this show, which was one of the stories. Benoit and Edge going for the tag team titles. And then later on, you had Chris Benoit versus Kane, which was also a good match. The main event, Hell in a Cell, Triple H versus Shawn Michaels. A lot of people think very highly of this match. I felt it was overrated. It was very long, it was very slow, very methodical, and if that's the kind of wrestling you like, then this match is definitely for you. But watching it a second time, I found it to be very boring. And that's just my personal opinion on it. I felt it was way too long. I felt it would have been way better if they had gone half the time, maybe 20, 25 minutes. Instead, they went over 40 minutes, and it was just too much. Next up, we have the Great American Bash, which was one of the worst SmackDown pay-per-views in WWE history. I felt it was a continuation of Judgment Day, where you had a very weak undercard. It wasn't like the previous year where you had this great talent roster. All of a sudden, you had these guys with very little talent appearing on the pay-per-view. Guys like Luther Reigns, guys like Mordecai, and this would end up being Mordecai's last match. I mean, you had Mordecai versus Bob Holly. Not a good match. You had Kenzo Suzuki, another guy that didn't really do very well in WWE. Him against Billy Gunn. Luther Reigns versus Charlie Haas. This was a major pay-per-view, or supposed to be a major pay-per-view. It's really a B-pay-per-view, but still, any pay-per-view should be a big event. You're paying $45, $50, and this is the best that you get. Definitely not one of SmackDown's better periods. You had the bull rope match, JBL versus Eddie Guerrero, which I thought was a good match, but I hated the finish. I thought it was terrible. It was very cheap. You had Eddie Guerrero knocking JBL into the corner, and Eddie Guerrero touched the turnbuckle, the 4 corners, to win the match, or so we thought. The referee ruled Eddie Guerrero the winner, but then you had Kurt Angle come out, and since he was the heel authority figure, he reversed the referee's decision and declared JBL the champion. Growing up, I was always led to believe, because WWE drilled it in my head and drilled it in the viewers' heads, that the referee's decision is final. So Kurt Angle comes out here and he's changing the decision of the match. I just thought it was stupid. Really lame. And of course it led to the JBL reign as WWE Champion, which I was never a fan of. And then we had the main event. Oh boy. Undertaker in a handicap match against the Dudley Boys. And Paul Bearer was threatening to murder Paul Bearer on live pay-per-view if Undertaker did not do the right thing. The right thing, apparently, was for Undertaker to lay down to the Dudley Boys, which, of course, he did not do. And Paul Heyman did not follow up on his threat by killing Paul Bearer, who was in this big crate, and they were going to pour cement and kill him that way. This was one of the most ridiculous storylines ever in WWE. Undertaker did win the match, so we thought, oh great, Paul Bearer is saved. But no, Undertaker, I guess, doesn't like being put in this position, so he said, screw it, I'm going to cut my losses. And he told Paul Bearer to rest in peace, and then he pulled the lever, and Paul Bearer died on pay-per-view, although WWE later claimed he was just severely injured. And eventually we would see Paul Bearer again in WWE, but that would be about 6 years into the future. So for the time being, this was the end of Paul Bearer. I don't know what WWE was thinking. Undertaker did a lot of damage to his character during this time, in my opinion. Just a really poor pay-per-view. So let's move on here now to something a little bit more positive. Not a lot. We had Vengeance. This show was built around Eugene, so if you're not a Eugene fan, you will not like this pay-per-view. I actually enjoyed the Eugene character more than most, so I found this pay-per-view to be quite entertaining. The big storyline, of course, was Chris Benoit versus Triple H, and Eugene was friends with Chris Benoit, but Triple H was trying to manipulate Eugene. See, I liked the storyline. At least it's an interesting storyline. And then the big tease was, what would Eugene do? Of course, Eugene finally came out at the end of the match and wasn't sure what to do. And then there was a battle over the steel chair. Benoit and Eugene were fighting over the chair, and Eugene accidentally hit Triple H with the chair and cost him the match. So Chris Benoit retained the title because of Eugene. I felt this was entertaining. I know some people out there don't like the character or didn't like the character. And then you had the tag team title match, La Resistance against Eugene and Ric Flair. I just love Ric Flair's reaction to everything Eugene does, and to me it was really entertaining. So I was entertained with all the Eugene stuff. So it's just a matter of whether you like the character or not. And a couple other good matches on this show. Edge versus Randy Orton. Edge won the IC title, although the fans were starting to turn on Edge at this point. And then Kane versus Matt Hardy was decent. So, you know, this was a fine pay-per-view. This was an entertaining pay-per-view, in my opinion. Not the best pay-per-view of all time, but certainly wasn't a boring one. Next up, we have Unforgiven. This was the end of a very short title reign for Randy Orton. Orton had beaten Chris Benoit at SummerSlam to win the WWE title, the World Heavyweight title, and then he would proceed to lose it here to Triple H 1 month later. It was a shame because Orton had some momentum, and then it was quickly wiped out by Triple H regaining the title. And granted, he had the outside interference, but still, WWE put all this stock into Randy Orton, and then he loses the title right away. So, whatever. Looking at some of the other matches on this show, one of the worst pay-per-view matches. It's had the reputation for being one of the worst pay-per-view matches in WWE history. Basically, you had Trish Stratus against Victoria with Tyson Tomko out there, as the bodyguard for Trish. And then you had somebody come out dressed in drag, who turned out to be Stevie Richards. And then that led to Tyson Tomko versus Stevie Richards on pay-per-view. Impromptu match, and it was terrible. It does live up to the reputation as one of the worst matches of all time on pay-per-view. So if you really want to torture yourself, you can watch this one. And then you had the ladder match between Chris Jericho and Christian. I actually thought this was a little disappointing. I thought it was a good match, but far below some of the classic ladder matches in WWE. And then you had Shawn Michaels versus Kane, which I thought was a good match. I enjoyed it. I liked the storyline with Lita trying to get revenge on Kane. This was when the whole Lita-Kane wedding angle was going down. And Shawn Michaels was fighting for her honor. And, I thought this was a good match. So, overall, good show, but nothing special. It is another middle-of-the-road pay-per-view. Nothing too great, nothing too terrible. Next up, we have No Mercy. The streak of weak SmackDown pay-per-views continued with this one. Main event was the Last Ride match. JBL versus The Undertaker. Wasn't a fan of this match. Wasn't a fan of the finish. Of course, the big storyline here was that the JBL cabinet, Orlando Jordan and the Bashams, they could not interfere in the match. So you think maybe you're going to get a match with a clean finish. But nope. You have Heidenreich interfere, and since he wasn't part of the cabinet, he could get away with it, and JBL retained the title. So, whatever. Big Show versus Kurt Angle. I actually thought this was a pretty entertaining match. I liked the storyline where Kurt Angle shot him with a tranquilizer dart and shaved his head, and then Big Show got his revenge here. I thought this was pretty good, actually, for a Big Show match. Billy Kidman versus Paul London was good. So, you had a pretty solid undercard. Although Eddie Guerrero could only do so much with Luther Reigns, I thought that they could have done something better with Eddie Guerrero, utilize him better than putting him in a match with Luther Reigns. Alright, so moving on here, we have Taboo Tuesday, the first WWE pay-per-view where the fans got to choose the stipulations and vote on stipulations and participants and all that stuff. It was a good concept, but the problem is when you're spending $45, $50 on a pay-per-view, you want to know what you're paying for. And these pay-per-views did not do big business, and WWE eventually dropped them. I'm hopeful WWE will bring back the concept now with the network, since all the pay-per-views are part of the $9.99 package, so why not? I liked the concept, it didn't work on pay-per-view for the reasons I stated. This was a fun show. The big storyline was Edge. This was Edge in the midst of his big heel turn, and he was part of the voting for the world title match. Shawn Michaels was injured, so Edge thought the fans would vote for him. Turns out they voted for Shawn Michaels, so luckily for WWE, the storyline played out the way they wanted it to. Edge was pissed off, and because him and Benoit did not get the votes, they were paired up in a tag team title match, and Edge decided to abandon Chris Benoit, and Benoit still managed to win the titles for him and Edge. Edge would leave the building, but then would interfere later during the Shawn Michaels Triple H match and cost Shawn the title. This was good stuff. I thought this was a well-done storyline with the Edge heel turn. So I was entertained by it. You did have some filler here, like the lingerie pillow fight with Christy Hemme and Carmella. That was bad. I enjoyed the hair versus hair match, Eric Bischoff versus Eugene. This was the big moment where Bischoff got his head shaved, and at first he didn't want to do it, but then Vince came out and forced him to do it. This was fun. I was entertained by this thoroughly. And Snitsky in his first pay-per-view match against Kane, the infamous "it wasn't my fault" when he caused Lita to lose her baby in the storyline, and Kane made his babyface turn and Snitsky destroyed him. I thought this was well done. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of Snitsky, but they did a good job booking him as a monster in this storyline with Kane. So you had Shelton Benjamin versus Chris Jericho. Shelton won the IC title. Good way to kick off the pay-per-view. This was a thumbs-up show for me, so I would definitely recommend checking it out. Next up, we have Armageddon. I thought this was a little bit better than some of the previous SmackDown pay-per-views. Main event, it was a good match, but once again, I was never a big fan of JBL as WWE Champion, and it was painfully obvious he was going to retain the title here because the whole storyline was that he was up against 3 other guys and that there was no way he was going to be able to retain the title. So of course he manages to do so. And once again, second SmackDown pay-per-view in a row, you have Heidenreich interfering and screwing over The Undertaker. So, very lame finish to this match. But, you know, it was really good for the most part, especially when you had Eddie Guerrero in there. And you had a street fight for the U.S. title, John Cena versus Jesus. The one and only pay-per-view appearance for Aaron Aguilera as the Jesus character. John Cena basically just beat the hell out of him. So, you know, it was a fun beatdown, seeing John Cena just take out this guy and brawl over the place and just beat the hell out of him. It was fun. And then you had the first pay-per-view appearance of The Miz against Daniel Puder in a 3-round boxing match. This was pretty boring. The only thing interesting about it was just seeing The Miz in the early part of his WWE career. Everything else on the show was pretty forgettable. Next up, we have New Year's Revolution. This show was all about the Elimination Chamber match, and you have to check this out just for the Elimination Chamber match itself. Actually, the whole pay-per-view was entertaining, largely due to the fans. The undercard was nothing special, although it was interesting because you had not 1 but 2 injuries back-to-back, and similar injuries, 2 knee injuries. Eugene in the first match hurt his knee, and then in the second match, Lita tore her ACL. Interesting developments with the 2 injuries back-to-back. And the crowd was amazing on this show. WWE was in Puerto Rico, their first pay-per-view in Puerto Rico, and the atmosphere was amazing. The crowd was red hot from start to finish. They made the show really fun to watch. So I would recommend checking out the whole pay-per-view, but you definitely have to see the Elimination Chamber match. One of the better Elimination Chamber matches, in my opinion. You had Shawn Michaels as the special guest referee, and the storyline with him and Edge, and Michaels would end up screwing over Edge in this match. And it was also the beginning of Batista's babyface turn, and he vowed allegiance to Triple H. The fans were starting to get behind Batista. They wanted to see him screw over Triple H, but in the end, Batista would stick with Triple H, and Triple H would retain the title. I really enjoyed the match. I thought everyone in the match looked good, and I liked the booking of the match, and the falls. All of them made sense. Everyone looked good. Nobody looked too weak. I thought it was very well done. So, definite thumbs up for this pay-per-view. And also I wanted to mention Muhammad Hassan's debut, a character that I enjoyed a lot. Even though this was a glorified Raw match, Hassan versus Jerry Lawler, it was still entertaining. Next up, we have No Way Out, 2005. The main event, I mean, on paper, if you look at the matches, you would probably be turned off. The main event, JBL defending the WWE title against Big Show in a barbed wire steel cage match. You had barbed wire on top of the cage. The barbed wire didn't really play a role in the match. So, I mean, that was lame, but they did do a cool moment where they were both on the top rope and Big Show slammed JBL off, and JBL literally went through the ring. And Big Show did not know what to do, so he tried to leave the ring. But by the time he got out there, JBL managed to crawl under the ring and crawl to the outside before Big Show could get out of the cage. And JBL won the title. So at least it was a creative screw job for JBL to retain the title. More creative than Heidenreich interfering and costing Undertaker the match. So this was okay. And then you had a big brawl afterwards with John Cena. John Cena beat Kurt Angle to get the title shot at WrestleMania. This was a good match. Everything else, I don't know. The Gauntlet match, I'm not really a big fan of the Gauntlet matches and the Tag Team Turmoil matches. Because it was the Cruiserweights, it was fine. Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio versus the Bashams to win the titles. This was a good match. So this was one of the better SmackDown pay-per-views around this time. Still, I wouldn't put it as a thumbs-up show. I think I would give it thumbs in the middle. Fairly standard pay-per-view. Nothing too great, but nothing too terrible. So that'll wrap it up for my thoughts on the WWE B pay-per-views from Bad Blood 2004 through No Way Out 2005. Leave a comment. Let me know what your favorite matches and moments were from these pay-per-views. And stay tuned to NoDQ.com for the very latest in the world of wrestling.